"If anyone asks," the stranger said, dripping snow onto Hannah Bellamy's front mat. "I was never here." That was the first mistake. Men who were never here did not arrive at the Quiet Lantern in wearing a black cashmere coat worth more than Hannah's pickup, boots polished like they had offended someone, and the kind of posture that made every wolf in the dining room lower his eyes before realizing nobody had asked him to. Hannah stood behind the counter with a dish towel over one shoulder, a pencil tucked behind her ear, and 3 unpaid tabs under her palm. Outside, the Vermont road was buried under 6 inches of fresh snow. Down in the valley, the royal estate glowed like a wedding cake on fire. The mate ball had started an hour ago, which meant every ambitious Omega in the North Star Pack Alliance was currently smiling under chandeliers, pretending not to count crown jewels. And here, in Hannah's Inn, a stranger with storm-gray eyes was trying very hard to look ordinary. He was bad at it. Mabel, the old wolfhound who had lived at the inn longer than most paying guests, limped over, sniffed his coat once, and sat directly on his right boot. Hannah looked down at the dog. Mabel only sat on 3 kinds of people: liars, tax assessors, and men carrying bacon. "You got a reservation?" Hannah asked. The stranger glanced toward the windows, where headlights crawled along the snowy road. "No name." A pause. "Too long." "Dorian Hale." Hannah wrote it down slowly, mostly to be polite to the lie. "Well, Mr. Hale, I've got no rooms left. Logging crew took the upstairs, honeymooners took the blue room, and Mrs. Talbot is in number 4 because her furnace quit and she believes freezing to death is bad for her bridge club." His jaw tightened. Somewhere under that expensive coat, something powerful shifted. Hannah felt it before she understood it. A warm pull in her chest, sharp and quiet, like a match struck in a dark kitchen. Her Omega instincts went still. Not scared. Listening. The stranger felt it too. His eyes locked on hers for one breath too long, and the dining room seemed to lose every sound except the old radiator knocking in the wall. Then a truck door slammed outside. Voices carried through the snow. "Royal Guard. Check the inn." The stranger's face didn't change, but the air around him did. Control, fear, and cedar smoke. Hannah had served enough wolves to know when an alpha was one bad second away from becoming everybody's problem. She reached under the counter, pulled out a clean white apron, and tossed it at his chest. He caught it by reflex. "Kitchen," she said. "Now." He stared at the apron like it had declared war. "I don't wash dishes." "That's adorable." Hannah lifted the counter gate. "People hiding from the Royal Guard wash dishes in my inn." Mabel stood, grabbed one of his leather gloves from his pocket, and carried it proudly toward the kitchen, like evidence. The stranger followed because the alternative was explaining why the Alpha King's crest was stitched inside his sleeve. Hannah stepped in front of the door just as the guards knocked. Behind her, the most powerful man in 9 packs stood at a sink full of soup bowls, wearing a cotton apron that said "Kiss the Cook" in faded red letters. For the first time all night, Hannah smiled. "Careful with the blue mugs," she called back. "They chip easy." And from the kitchen came a low, offended voice. "This is blackmail." Hannah opened the door to the Royal Guard and said sweetly, "Around here, we call it hospitality." The Royal Guard looked past Hannah, as if they expected a crown to roll out from under the pie display. There were 3 of them, all broad shoulders, wet coats, and serious faces made worse by snow melting off their eyebrows. The one in front gave her a polite nod that did not reach his eyes. "Miss Bellamy, we are looking for a man traveling alone. Dark coat, late 30s, alpha presence hard to miss." From the kitchen came the sharp clink of a plate being set down with too much royal irritation. Hannah smiled. "That describes half the men who come through here during hunting season." The guard sniffed the air. Every wolf did. It was rude, but pack law had made it respectable by giving it a name. His gaze moved toward the swinging kitchen door. Mabel, loyal to no law except her own opinion, shuffled over and lay directly across the threshold with the heavy sigh of an elderly dog prepared to die for inconvenience. "Kitchen staff only," Hannah said. "We are short tonight." The guard frowned. "You hired someone?" "I hired anyone with hands." Another clink came from the sink, followed by Dorian's low voice. "This sponge is structurally useless." Hannah did not blink. "New guy is dramatic." One of the younger guards almost smiled. The lead guard did not. He stepped closer, and Hannah felt the alpha pressure roll off him, mild compared with the man in her kitchen, but still enough to make the small bones in her wrist tighten. She hated that part. The old pack reflex. Lower your eyes. Make room. Apologize for taking up air. Hannah kept her chin level. You want coffee while you search my public dining room? She asked. No need to go into my kitchen unless you plan to help with the gravy pan. Behind the door, something scraped. Dorian had gone still. Hannah felt it in her chest, that strange silver pull, as if an invisible thread had been tied from her ribs to his. His fear was disciplined, locked down, wrapped in cedar and winter air, but it was there. Not fear for himself. Fear that the guards would find him and punish the innkeeper who had given him a cotton apron and an order. The lead guard finally stepped back. If you see him, report it. Anyone hiding the Alpha King tonight will answer to the Royal Council. Hannah's smile stayed in place, but the words landed cold. Of course. The guards left, boots crunching across the porch. She waited until their truck rolled down the road before she turned the lock. In the kitchen, Dorian stood at the sink with sleeves pushed to his forearms, one blue mug in his hand, and the faded apron tied over a shirt that probably cost more than her refrigerator. He looked at her like he was not used to being protected by women who bought dish soap in bulk. You lied to the royal guard, he said. You lied to me first. His mouth closed. Good. Hannah crossed the kitchen, took the mug from his hand, and checked it. Also, you left oatmeal on this. That is not oatmeal. It is now. Mabel dropped his stolen glove beside Hannah's shoe, then sneezed at him with deep personal judgment. Dorian looked down at the dog. Is she always like this? Only when she respects someone enough to be disappointed. For 1 second, his eyes softened, and the pull in Hannah's chest warmed so quickly she nearly looked away. He felt it too. She saw his fingers tighten on the edge of the sink. Neither of them said the word mate. Words made things real, and real things tended to come with laws, councils, and people who knocked on doors in the snow. Hannah handed him another bowl. Rinse first, then scrub. Dorian accepted it with the grave focus of a man negotiating a treaty. And if I refuse? Hannah leaned against the counter. Then I tell Mabel you are carrying bacon. The Alpha King of 9 packs looked at the old dog, then at the sink full of dishes, and quietly picked up the sponge. By sunrise, the entire North Star pack knew the Alpha King had vanished, because royal scandals traveled faster than snowplows, and with less concern for road safety. The old television above Hannah's coffee station flickered between a weather warning, an emergency council statement, and a polished woman in a pearl-white dress standing beneath the ballroom chandeliers as if heartbreak had been scheduled between dessert and the first dance. We ask for calm, Lady Seraphine Cole said, her voice soft enough to sound bruised and practiced enough to sound expensive. His Majesty may be under emotional influence. A vulnerable alpha can be led away from duty by an unsuitable omega. Hannah stopped pouring coffee. Dorian stood beside the sink with a towel in his hand and one clean plate in front of him, which was progress only if the standard was medieval. The dining room went quiet. The loggers at table 3 looked at Hannah, then at Dorian, then back at Hannah with the cautious interest of men realizing breakfast had developed a monarchy problem. Hannah turned up the volume. Lord Calder-Wren appeared next. Silver hair, neat suit, eyes like a locked filing cabinet. The Royal Council will locate King Dorian Ashford and restore order before the Alliance loses confidence. The towel slipped slightly in Dorian's hand. Hannah did not look at him right away. She finished filling the mug, set it down, and said, Dorian Hale, huh? Mabel made a low sound from under the counter, not quite a growl, more like an old woman saying she had told everybody so. Dorian closed his eyes for half a second. Hannah, no, you do not get to say my name like that after letting me lie to armed guards for you. His jaw tightened, but he took it. That was the first smart thing he had done since walking into her and dressed like a secret with shoulders. I did not come here to endanger you. That is not the same as telling me the truth. One of the loggers stood and quietly carried his plate to the bus tub, because even humans with bad manners understood when a room belonged to someone else. Dorian looked toward the windows. Outside, 2 dark vehicles crawled along the road below the inn, not stopping yet, just watching. The mate ball was not a celebration, he said. It was a cage with music. Calder wants me bonded to Seraphine because her family owes him half the eastern seats. If I choose her, he rules through my crown. If I refuse in public, he calls me unstable. Hannah felt the silver thread in her chest pull tight, warm and unwanted. Mate. The word hovered between them like a lit match near dry curtains. She pushed it down. Biology could have its opinion after she finished being furious. So you ran. I left before they could force the announcement. And came to my inn. Urine was quiet. Hannah laughed once, sharp and tired. Nothing says quiet like turning my breakfast rush into treason. Before Dorian could answer, Mabel limped to the back door and began scratching at the threshold. Not random. Never random. Hannah followed her and saw it there, dusted across the porch boards in a thin gray ring. Ash. Bitter, metallic, wrong. Her stomach dropped. Dorian was behind her in a second, but he did not push past. He looked down and went very still. Wolfsbane ash, he said. Hannah wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the kitchen heat. That was not their last night. Dorian's voice lowered. It will not kill me. Comforting. But if I step through it angry, exhausted, and already fighting my wolf, it could make me lose control in front of witnesses. Hannah looked toward the road, where the dark vehicles had finally turned into her drive. Now she understood. They did not want to find the missing king. They wanted to build a story around him, and they had chosen her in as the stage. The first black vehicle stopped 10 feet from the porch, and Dorian Ashford did something Hannah did not expect from a man born to command 9 packs. He stepped back, not out of cowardice, out of control. His hand closed around the edge of the kitchen table, hard enough to make the salt shaker jump, and his eyes flashed that cold silver gray that made every wolf in the dining room suddenly remember an urgent appointment with the floor. Get everyone upstairs, he said. His voice was quiet, which made it worse. Hannah had heard loud alphas before. Loud alphas usually wanted attention. Quiet ones were trying not to become a headline. She turned to the loggers, Mrs. Talbot, and the honeymooners who had come down for pancakes at the worst possible moment in romantic history. All right, folks. Free coffee upstairs. Take the back stairs, bring your plates, and nobody asks dramatic questions until afternoon. Mrs. Talbot pointed at the television. Is that the king? Hannah handed her the syrup. That is a customer with poor timing. Mabel barked once, sharp and bossy, and somehow the entire room obeyed the dog faster than they would have obeyed royal law. Chairs scraped. Boots moved. The guests disappeared toward the stairwell, whispering like people who wanted to survive gossip long enough to repeat it. Outside, doors opened. Men in council coats stepped into the snow, not guards exactly, but worse, officials with clean gloves and permission slips. Dorian's breath grew uneven behind Hannah. The wolfsbane ash at the threshold smelled bitter, like pennies and dead weeds. It was not strong enough to destroy him. It was designed to humiliate him. That made Hannah angrier than if it had been meant to hurt. Go to the pantry, she said. Dorian gave her a look. Even half shaken, he had a king's talent for making suggestions feel like crimes. I will not hide behind Ken Peaches while Calder's men threaten you. You hid behind dish soap last night. That was tactical. It was Palmolive. His mouth moved like he almost smiled. Then the ash hit him again on the next draft from the door. His shoulders locked. His wolf pressed close to the surface. Not a monster, not a danger. Just a trapped living thing shoved too hard by men who called cruelty policy. Hannah stepped closer, slow enough not to crowd him. Look at me. Hannah, step back. No, his eyes snapped to hers. The silver thread between them pulled tight, warm under her ribs. Mate bond or not, fear or not, she could feel the truth of him. He was not afraid of losing power. He was afraid of scaring her. That did something to her heart she did not have time to examine. My father used to take in border wolves during winter, she said softly. Big ones. Angry ones. The kind that acted like being tired was a moral failure. He always said the same thing. You do not beat panic out of a creature. You give it a door, a light, and a reason to come back. Dorian swallowed. My father said a king commands his wolf. Your father sounds like a man who never had to calm one down in a kitchen while wearing a ridiculous apron. The corner of his mouth twitched. Barely. But his breathing changed. Mabel shoved her head against his knee with the steady authority of an elderly nurse who had seen worse patients and liked fewer of them. Hannah reached for the back door curtain and pulled it shut, blocking the sight of the ash and the men outside. Sit, she said. That is an order. That is hospitality. This time, he sat on the floor beside the pantry door, back against the cabinet, crownless and exhausted under the yellow kitchen light. Hannah sat across from him with a flashlight in one hand and a rolling pin near her foot, because trust was lovely, but backup was practical. Outside, someone knocked hard enough to rattle the glass. Dorian closed his eyes. Hannah did not move. "Let them knock," she said. "In this inn, even kings get to breathe first." The knock came again, sharper this time, the kind of knock used by men who believed doors were a temporary inconvenience. Hannah looked through the front window and saw Lord Calder standing on her porch in a charcoal overcoat, his silver hair untouched by the wind, because apparently even weather knew when politics had arrived. Beside him stood Lady Seraphine Cole in a pale wool dress, her hands folded, her expression soft enough to sell sympathy by the pound. Behind them, two council aides held cameras from the pack channel. Of course they did. Nothing said concern for the king like bringing a broadcast crew to a small inn before breakfast. Dorian rose from the kitchen floor, steadier now, though the strain still sat in his shoulders. "Do not open that door." Hannah picked up the rolling pin. "This door pays property tax. It opens when I say it opens." His eyes narrowed. "That is Calder." I guessed. He looks like a man who alphabetizes grudges. Mabel sneezed, which seemed fair. Hannah unlocked the door, but left the chain on. Cold air slipped through the gap. Calder smiled at her, as if she were a stain he planned to remove politely. "Miss Bellamy, we have reason to believe His Majesty is inside." Hannah leaned against the frame. "Good morning to you too." Seraphine stepped forward, eyes shining for the cameras. "We are all worried about him. If someone has taken advantage of his exhaustion, the pack deserves to know." Hannah looked at the camera, then back at Seraphine. "Funny, when I worry about people, I usually bring soup, not witnesses." One of the aides lowered the camera half an inch before remembering his salary. Calder's smile thinned. "You are a low-ranked Omega running an unregistered private shelter during a royal crisis. It is called an inn. And yet the king disappeared from a sacred mate ball and came here." Behind Hannah, Dorian moved, but she lifted one hand without looking back. Not to silence him, to tell him she could stand. The silver pull under her ribs warmed, angry and proud and terrifyingly alive. Calder saw the movement. His eyes sharpened. "There it is. Influence." "No," Hannah said. "That is a woman telling a room full of overdressed wolves not to track snow across her floor." Seraphine's lips parted with a practiced little tremble. "Miss Bellamy, you may not understand the damage you are causing. A king cannot follow every scent that comforts him." The words hit harder than Hannah wanted them to. Comforts him. As if she were a blanket, a trick, a passing weakness. Dorian's voice came from behind her, low and dangerous in its control. "Enough." Calder turned at once, delighted. Dorian stepped into view wearing a borrowed flannel shirt, damp hair, and the faded apron still tied at his waist. The cameras caught everything. The Alpha King of 9 packs looked like he had lost a war against breakfast dishes. For one beautiful second, Calder forgot his speech. Hannah would have enjoyed that more if her heart had not been pounding. "Your Majesty," Calder said carefully. "The council is relieved." "No," Dorian said. "The council is exposed." Mabel chose that moment to push past Hannah's legs and waddle straight to Seraphine. She sniffed the hem of the pale wool dress, sneezed so hard her ears flapped, then caught the edge of Seraphine's glove in her teeth. Seraphine gasped. A folded paper slipped from the glove and landed on the porch between them. Hannah picked it up before Calder could move. The paper smelled bitter. Metallic. Wrong. Wolfsbane ash. Printed across the top was the name of a chemical supplier licensed only to the Royal Council. "The camera," aide whispered. "We are still live." Calder's face went flat. Hannah looked at the paper, then at Dorian. "You brought me a royal conspiracy before 9 in the morning." Dorian's gaze stayed on hers, apologetic and fierce at the same time. "I did say my timing was poor." Hannah held up the paper for the camera. "Then I guess breakfast is canceled. We have evidence to serve." The pack channel cut the live feed 12 seconds after Hannah held up the paper, which was about 11 seconds too late for Lord Calderon's reputation and 1 second too early for Hannah's personal satisfaction. The screen above the coffee station went black, then switched to a commercial for snow tires, because apparently capitalism survived royal treason without blinking. Calder left with the stiff calm of a man already planning 3 lies and a charity luncheon. Seraphine followed him, pale and silent, but before she stepped into the black vehicle, she looked back at Hannah. Not angry, scared. That look bothered Hannah more than the insult had. Dorian watched the cars disappear down the snowy road. his face hard, the ridiculous apron still tied over his borrowed flannel. Like history, had a sense of humor and no mercy. The supplier on that paper is counsel restricted, he said. Only elders can authorize wolfsbane compounds. Hannah folded the paper and tucked it into her coat pocket. Then we asked the supplier who placed the order. You are wearing my shirt, standing in my inn, and your conspiracy sneezed on my porch. We passed about 3 disasters ago. Mabel barked once, approving the legal standard. The supplier address led them 12 miles north, past frozen maple farms and a closed gas station with a hand-painted sign that said coffee was a human right. The building itself sat behind an old stone chapel, half warehouse, half freezer, the kind of place people used when they wanted paperwork to feel colder than the crime. Dorian parked behind a snowbank. Hannah noticed he chose the driver's seat farthest from the chapel windows, not because he was afraid, but because he had spent a lifetime measuring exits. Inside, the air smelled like metal shelves, dried herbs, and secrets pretending to be inventory. Hannah found the records first because men like Calder hid crimes in official folders and assumed ordinary workers would be too polite to open drawers. She was an innkeeper. Drawers were where guests left trouble. There were invoices for wolfsbane ash, delivery routes to the ballroom, and a sealed packet labeled compatibility review. Dorian broke the seal with a look that could have made weaker paper apologize. His eyes moved across the pages. This is impossible. Hannah stepped closer. What is it? A fabricated mate analysis. Seraphine's scent profile, my bloodline, projected alliance stability. He turned another page and went still. They made it look like she was the best match. Best match for love? Hannah asked. Dorian's mouth tightened. For control. The next page carried a signature Hannah did not know, but Dorian did. His hand lowered slowly. Gareth Pike, he said. My father's advisor. He trained me after the old king died. He taught me pack law. The room got quieter. Even Mabel stopped sniffing boxes. Hannah saw the betrayal hit him, not loudly, not dramatically, but deep enough that his shoulders changed shape under the coat. A boy inside the king had just learned one more trusted adult had sold him for stability. She reached toward him, then stopped before touching his sleeve. The silver thread between them warmed anyway. Dorian looked at the papers, then at her, and for half a second something careful and ugly crossed his face. If we present this wrong, Calder will say you forged it to secure your place beside me. Hannah stared at him. The words were practical. The wound was personal. You think I want a place beside you? That is not what I meant. It is what you protected first. He opened his mouth, but the silence after was too long. Long enough to answer. Hannah picked up the packet. I have spent my whole life being told low-ranked Omegas should be grateful for scraps. I am not adding your doubt to the menu. She walked out with Mabel at her heels, snow blowing hard across the chapel steps. Dorian called her name once, not as a king, just as a man who knew he had broken something. Hannah did not turn around. By the time he found the final page, it was almost dark. Calder had already prepared an arrest order for her, stamped for the royal hall. The charge was Omega infiltration. The time was tonight. Hannah reached the royal hall just as the orchestra started the second waltz, because nothing in pack politics said emergency, like violins and 300 people pretending not to panic. Snow clung to her boots. Her coat was still damp from the walk across the palace grounds, and Mabel trotted beside her with the grim confidence of a dog who had never once been impressed by marble. At the entrance, 2 guards moved to stop her. Hannah held up the sealed packet. Tell Lord Calder his missing evidence learned how to walk. That got her inside. The ballroom looked unreal after the warmth of the inn and the cold warehouse. Crystal chandeliers burned overhead. White roses climbed the pillars. Noble families stood in careful circles, every smile polished thin. At the far end of the room, Seraphine waited near the dais in pale silver, beautiful enough to make insecurity feel underdressed. Calder stood beside her, speaking to the pack channel cameras with his calm funeral voice. His Majesty has been led away from duty by an outside influence. Until he is recovered, the council must protect the throne from manipulation. Hannah walked straight down the center aisle. Conversations died in waves. Someone whispered, "That is her." Someone else said, "The innkeeper." A woman near the champagne table added, "Low-ranked Omega." Like Hannah had tracked mud on the concept of civilization. Mabel sneezed at her shoes. Hannah did not stop until she reached the foot of the dais. Calder looked down at her. and for 1 second, his face showed pure annoyance before the cameras reminded him to look noble. "Miss Bellamy," he said, "this is not a public tavern." "Good. Then maybe people here know how to listen." A few guests made shocked little sounds. Hannah lifted the packet. "These are invoices for wolfsbane ash delivered to the ballroom. A false compatibility review naming Lady Seraphine as the ideal match. And an order prepared before I ever walked in here, accusing me of Omega infiltration." Calder smiled. "A convenient bundle of papers, carried by the very woman who hid the king. I gave him soup and dish duty. Your definition of hiding is generous." The room shifted, uncertain. Seraphine looked at Hannah with wide, frightened eyes, and Hannah finally understood. Seraphine was not innocent, but she was not free either. Calder turned to the cameras. "This is what desperation looks like. A common Omega finds herself near power and mistakes a biological reaction for destiny." The word struck the room cleanly. Scent witch. Opportunist. False mate. People did not have to say them loudly for Hannah to hear them. Her throat tightened. The silver thread in her chest pulled toward somewhere beyond the hall, toward Dorian, toward the man who had doubted her at the exact wrong moment. She wanted to hate him for that. She wanted him there anyway. "I do not want your crown," Hannah said, voice shaking once before she steadied it. "I run an inn. I fix leaky faucets. I know which guests steal towels. I wanted one quiet winter and maybe a new dishwasher if the pipes survived February." A ripple moved through the crowd, almost a laugh, almost mercy. Calder cut it off. "And yet you expect us to believe you risked everything for nothing?" Hannah looked at the cameras, then at the old families, then at the Omegas standing in the back with lowered eyes. "No, I risked it because someone used duty as a leash and called it love of pack." Calder's smile vanished. He raised one hand, and 2 council guards stepped forward with the arrest order. Mabel barked so sharply the orchestra stopped. Then the old dog bolted toward the side doors, disappeared behind a velvet curtain, and came dragging something black across the marble. A coat. Dorian's coat from the inn. It bumped over the floor with no dignity at all, shedding snowmelt and one leather glove. Mabel dropped it at Hannah's feet and pawed at the torn lining. A small royal seal recorder slipped out and clicked against the stone. Calder went pale. The device lit up, and his own voice filled the ballroom. "If the true mate is lowborn, we ruin her before he can choose her." For one long second, the royal hall forgot how to breathe. The recorder clicked softly on the marble, Calder's voice still hanging above the chandeliers like smoke no one could wave away. Seraphine closed her eyes. A councilman near the dais muttered something that sounded like a prayer, but was probably math, because men in power always counted exits before morals. Calder reached for the recorder. Hannah stepped on the edge of Dorian's coat and looked up at him. "I would not." Mabel growled, old, low, and deeply committed to public service. Then the side doors opened. Dorian Ashford walked in without a crown, without an escort, and without the apron, which was probably wise for national stability. He wore a dark coat over the borrowed flannel, and snow still clung to his shoulders. The room bowed by instinct, but he did not look at the room first. He looked at Hannah, not over her, not past her, at her. Calder recovered fast. Men like him kept emergency dignity in every pocket. "Your Majesty, thank God. This woman has caused enough confusion. She should be removed while the council verifies the recording." Dorian walked down the aisle. The crowd parted so quickly a few noble families nearly discovered cardio. He stopped beside Hannah, close enough that the silver thread in her chest warmed, but not close enough to crowd her. That mattered, more than it should have. "No one removes Miss Bellamy," he said. Calder's smile hardened. "You are not yourself." Dorian turned to him. "I am more myself than I have been in years." The ballroom went very quiet. Dorian lifted the recorder from the floor and held it up for the cameras. Lord Calder Wren arranged a false mate review, distributed wolfsbane ash near my path, and prepared charges against an innocent Omega before she ever entered this hall. Calder's face stayed calm, but his scent soured. Even humans would have noticed if humans had better noses and worse manners. "She influenced you," Calder said. "A low-ranked Omega with an unregistered scent gift. You said yourself she was dangerous." Hannah looked at Dorian then, because that was the cut that still hurt. Not Calder's insult. Dorian's doubt. He did not hide from it. His throat moved once. "I was wrong." 200 years of royal portraits had probably never prepared the North Star Pack for an alpha king apologizing in public to a woman wearing snow boots and a coat with a missing button. Dorian faced the cameras. Hannah Bellamy gave me shelter when she had no reason to trust me. I repaid that by questioning her motives the moment her courage made my life harder. That failure is mine, not hers, not the Bond's. Mine. Hannah's eyes burned, but she kept her chin up. Forgiveness was not a vending machine. One apology did not mean the candy dropped. Seraphine stepped forward, trembling but standing. Calder told me the report was approved by the old advisory circle. He said if I refused, my family would lose our seats and protection. Calder snapped, "Be silent." Dorian looked at him, and the command in the room changed hands. "She will speak." Seraphine took a breath. The report was false. I knew after the second draft. I signed anyway. The confession broke the room open. Nobles whispered. Omegas in the back lifted their eyes. The pack channel cameras stayed fixed on every face, hungry and finally useful. Dorian ordered an emergency inquiry before the full alliance, effective immediately. Calder was stripped of council authority pending trial under pack law. No spectacle, no blood, just the clean sound of power being taken away from a man who had mistaken control for leadership. When it was done, Dorian turned back to Hannah. His voice lowered, meant for her, but heard by everyone. "I will not ask you to be Luna tonight. I lost the right to ask for anything." Mabel picked up the recorder, carried it to Hannah, and dropped it on her boot like a bill. Hannah looked at Dorian for a long moment. "Good," she said softly. "Start by learning how to knock." The first thing Dorian Ashford did after regaining control of his kingdom was leave Hannah Bellamy alone. Not forever, not dramatically, just long enough to prove he understood the difference between a mate bond and a claim. Calder Wren lost his council seat before sunset. By morning, every pack station from Vermont to Montana had replayed the recording, Seraphine's confession, and the sight of an alpha king apologizing to a low-ranked Omega in front of the old families. People argued about the scandal for days. They argued about wolfsbane permits, council authority, royal duty, and whether Mabel should be given an official title. Hannah privately believed the dog would abuse power immediately. The mate ball was abolished by emergency decree, which made several noble mothers faint with the sorrow of wasted gowns. Dorian replaced it with something quieter and harder to fake, a public right of refusal. No alpha, omega, beta, or any wolf under pack law could be forced into a bond for alliance, rank, inheritance, or council stability. He also opened 3 council seats to low-ranked workers, border healers, and small pack owners who knew what leadership cost when nobody was watching. It was not romantic. It was paperwork. Hannah respected that more. Love that changed nothing was just weather. Love that changed rules had decided to become useful. A week later, she was closing the Quiet Lantern Inn after dinner when someone knocked. Not pounded, not commanded. Knocked. 3 respectful taps on the front door. Mabel lifted her head from the rug, gave one approving huff, and went back to sleep like a retired judge satisfied with the sentence. Hannah opened the door. Dorian stood on the porch in a plain wool coat, snow dusting his shoulders, carrying a cardboard box, and looking less like a king than a man hoping not to be thrown into a snowbank. "I brought back your shirt," he said. Hannah looked at the box. "That shirt better not be alone." He opened it. Inside were 6 blue mugs, 3 dish towels, 1 industrial sponge, and the faded apron folded with military precision. "I also replaced the mug I chipped." "You chipped too." He paused. "There are 6 mugs. That is a strong opening apology." His mouth almost smiled. Almost was progress. Hannah let him in. The inn smelled like coffee, with smoke and lemon soap. Dorian stood just inside the door, waiting, and that was when Hannah realized he had learned something no crown could teach. Power entered rooms expecting space. Respect waited to be invited. "Kitchen," she said. "There is a pot soaking." He took off his coat. "Of course there is." For 20 minutes, the Alpha King washed dishes under Hannah's supervision. He did not do it perfectly. He used too much soap, stacked bowls like a man building a defensive wall, and asked one serious question about whether cast iron was legally washable. Hannah laughed before she could stop herself. The sound warmed the room. Dorian looked at her then, not hungry for forgiveness, not demanding the bond give him what his choices had not earned, just grateful to be standing where her laughter could reach him. I am still angry, she said quietly. I know. I still feel it. The bond. So do I. That does not make me yours. Dorian set the dish towel down and faced her fully. No. It makes me responsible for how I stand near you. Outside, snow fell soft over the porch, over the road, over the royal estate, glowing far below like a place that had finally learned it was not the center of every story. Hannah thought about loyalty and how often powerful people confused it with obedience. She thought about Omegas taught to shrink, Alphas taught to command, and a council that had nearly broken a kingdom because it feared a woman who owned an inn and knew when a man was lying. Then she handed Dorian the worst pan in the sink. Good, she said. Stand near that and scrub. He looked into the pan with the quiet courage of a leader facing consequences. Mabel chose that moment to drag a small velvet box from his coat pocket and drop it at Hannah's feet. Dorian went completely still. Hannah looked at the box, then at him. That better not be what I think it is. It was for later. How much later? After the dishes. And after you wanted it. And after I had earned the right to ask. Hannah stared at him for a long moment. Then she picked up the box, set it on the highest shelf, and pointed at the sink. Then you have time. Dorian nodded, picked up the sponge, and went back to work. The crown could wait. The bond could wait. But trust, Hannah had learned, was built in small, ordinary acts. A truthful answer, a respectful knock, a king who washed the pan he had been given. And for the first time since the snow began, the quiet lantern inn was truly quiet.